Mother is the most mysterious person of my life. If you know my movies, there is an obsession in my movies which is my father. In all my movies there is some kind of Oedipal conflict. The mother is always a kind of remote, hidden figure. My mother was born in Australia, in Sydney. That's why I think I have a quarter of my blood, which is Australian Irish. My grandmother was called Mulligan, and I'm very proud of it. I say always I'm Italian Irish. And she came to Italy, and her father was Italian. She came to Italy when she was very little, 5 or 6. She is a kind of silent, reassuring muse for my father, who is a very good Italian poet. Always being next to him, a bit in a kind of shade, but of course with a great, great power with him. It's the most amazing couple. They never split even for 5 minutes. And in some ways, an impossible model, impossible to imitate, impossible to compete with, because I never seen a case of symbiosis, of total osmosis.
Were you loved and protected then in your childhood?
I was maybe even over-loved, but in a very strange way. You know, I think that when there is the lack of affection in somebody, it doesn't have anything to do with the reality, the objective facts. How did it go when you were a little baby? It's something that is within you, which has origins, I think, even more distant. My childhood was in the country, next to Parma. In fact, between the city of Parma, which is a provincial, beautiful city, and the hills, in a kind of sweet landscape, plain. And that's why in many movies I went back to these places. And my father, as I said, is a poet. And I learn everything there. I learn everything in that place. I learn everything from him.
And he took you out of the village into the city to see movies. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, he was taking me when I was 8, 9, 10 to see all the opening movies, because he was the movie critic of the Gazzetta di Parma, the Parma Gazette. And that's maybe where everything started. In fact, I began writing poems because, of course, I wanted to imitate my father, like every child wants to imitate his father or mother. And at a certain moment, at the age of 15, I felt terribly uncomfortable. I felt this poetry doesn't belong to me, it's not mine. So I was looking for something which was totally mine. But I'm very grateful.
Yours and not his.
Sorry?
Yours and not his.
Yeah, mine and not.
So you made a film. You made a film.
I made a first film when I was 16, and of course it was in 16 mil. And it was a little home movie, but with a story, a fiction, a real fiction. And I knew I would have been a director. I don't know how, but I was so incredibly sure, with the arrogance you can have only when you are less than 20. And that's why my first movie is was made when I was 21, which is quite... You know, I'm a quite young man, I'm not too old, but as a director I'm very old, because I started in 1962, so I've been a director for 27 years.
You made another short movie about the killing of a pig.
Oh, yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's my movie number 2.
Why?
Because I was looking out around me, around the house where we were living, and I was trying to to tell the emotion of the things that were going on around that. And the killing of the pig is one of the most dramatic and meantime exciting moment of feast in the countryside. And you know, you don't throw away anything in the pig. Everything becomes something to eat, or the hair to do brushes. And I mean, you use everything. And that was fascinating. I still love pigs very much. When I see a pig, I see I become very, very moved.
What were the politics of the countryside in those days?
We're talking about the late 40s and early 50s. Parma, in Emilia, has traditionally been a very red country. I mean, it was a strong communist milieu. And I was very close to the peasants, and that's why I was participating to their emotions. I was going with them to the demonstration, and I lived a kind of split life, half with the family of my father. My grandfather was the landowner, and half with the peasant. As soon as I could, I was running to.
After Camare Secca, your first film, you seem to get very interested in film theory. How did that happen?
You know, Camare Secca came from a little subject of Pierpaolo Pasolini. We say subject in Italy to say the germinal idea of a movie, 2, 3, 4 pages. So it was in some way a movie which everybody found Pasoliniano, a la Pasolini, which for me, again, with this obsession on not having father's figure, bracket, and my life is full of father figures, closing the bracket, I went for my second movie, Before the Revolution, toward something more personal, really almost autobiographical, like always first movies tend to be. And it was the moment of my great love for La Nouvelle Vague, the new wave. That's the way it was called, the French cinema. Italian cinema was becoming less interesting. It was the end of neorealism, the end of the great neorealism. Neorealism was becoming the Italian comedy, it was changing. And I was totally fascinated by Godard, René, Truffaut, Rivette, Romer, etc. I remember that in my first interviews with the journalists were coming to ask me about, I was very young, so I was a kind of case. I always was saying, could we eventually speak French? Could we do the interview in French? But they would say, you are Italian, what's that? I would say, well, because French is the language of cinema. I was very extremist. And yes, in fact, in the 60s, which were really kind of glorious period for cinema, I felt I was part of a kind of movement which was including Italy, France, maybe Brazil, Canada, United States, England, etc. And I remember that the common point was that we were not only telling a story of characters, a plot, but we were very interested in talking about cinema itself. So there were like two movies going on together, a story and a kind of essays hidden between the lines.
But when you went on to make The Conformist after The Spider Stratagem, Godard notoriously hated it and told you so. Is that right? That must have hurt.
Yeah, it was after '68. That's where my great friendship with Godard, we were very, very good friends, started to shake. It was because he became a very strong extremist. He became pro-Maoist, and I couldn't stand the intellectual, the extreme left, especially the Maoist groups. And my friends, I mean, many of my friends were like that, and we had constantly, all the time, discussions and fight and row about that. I think that I got a member of the Italian Communist Party as a reaction against my extremist friends. Godard, for example. So he thought that I was moving towards a kind of more commercial cinema.
Were you?
Yes, on purpose, because I thought we were in a kind of cul-de-sac, in a kind of tunnel with no exit at the end of the 60s. There was this kind of misunderstanding about political cinema. And every movie had to be political. As I told you, I think that every movie is political. So, so I felt that all this kind of, we were used to call it rigor, of not thinking about the audience. In fact, I felt it was just the fear of talking to the audience and being refused by the audience. So I said I have to do a move. I have to move ahead. I have to switch from a cinema of monologue, like more or less all the cinema of the 60s. It was a kind of great monologue, but we were talking to ourselves, to a cinema of dialogue. I didn't know if somebody would have accepted that. I didn't know if I would have found an audience, in fact. And I think I did. And it meant to me a lot.
How does a film start for you? With an idea or an image or what?
Every time is different. There isn't a rule, single rule. It can be a moment of my life where I feel that I'm obsessed by the idea of meeting an unknown woman and keep on meeting her and making love with her in every possible way without knowing who she is. That was my obsession at the time I did Last Tango in Paris. It came out, Last Tango in Paris comes out from this very personal obsession. Some other times I read a book, and like The Conformist, or like also Spider Strategy, or my next movie, The Sheltering Sky. And I am fascinated, and I try to do a book, or, I mean, there isn't a rule.
You've chosen to work with great actors and actresses. Do you wheedle them? Do you seduce them? Do you bully them?
Again, every time is different. But I think I am a kind of, they say, wild psychoanalyst with them. I try to investigate what they're hiding. Let's mention the most famous actor I work with is Marlon Brando. What I wanted, it wasn't the Marlon Brando of the actor studio that we have seen in many movies, and he's great, but we know who he is. What I wanted is the secret Marlon Brando. I wanted to know more about himself. And in fact, I think it was, because, you know, since I think you cannot lie to the camera always sees the truth. I think that every film, even a fictional film, is a kind of cinema verite. You always start with fiction, and then you always end to do cinema verite, to do documentary. That's why I like to have great, famous, important actors, because it's a challenge to find out what they're hiding. And with Marlon, it was very strong. I think I fascinated him in some way, because at the end of the movie, when he saw the movie, he was quite shocked. And he didn't want to see me for a long time, because he felt that I stole something from him, that he didn't know what he was doing. But it's not all my fault. There's his complicity.
You've spent a large part of your life, or much time yourself, under psychoanalysis. Has that supported you down the years, or have you found out things out about yourself that you were hiding?
So this is a very private subject. Yeah, I had a very long analysis. One of these analyses that Freud calls interminable analysis. The movie which corresponds to the beginning of my analysis is The Spider Stratagem, which is a movie about the relationship between a son and a father. I think, especially in the first years, the analysis was incredibly important. I was somebody very closed, very hidden, with a lot of problem of communication. I changed a lot. But not only me, my movie changed. If you look at my movies before the analysis, they are much more close, etc. This is what I can say. I mean, this is a matter I really think it's wrong to expose too much.
In the same way as the actor gives something to you, are your movies also giving us something about you?
You can tell me that. I think that there is a lot that comes out during the shooting, because I'm a quite quiet, normal person during my life. When I shoot a movie, I change a lot. I enter in a kind of state of trance, if it is not too romantic to say that. And what's a movie? A movie, okay, you have a story, but it's also a research. I think that when I do a movie, I look for something. And this research, in some way, becomes the movie.
Which of your movies is the most important to you?
You know, I used to think in the past that the last one is the most important. In general, it's the one that you feel more connected to, more tied to. But now that I've done quite a lot, and now that I've been a director for such a long time, I think, okay, I will be completely sincere, and maybe it's something shameful to say. The movies I like the best are the real successful ones. And even if, for me, being successful sometimes means to pay a great price, because very often after a big success I have a terrible period of anguish. Then also it happened to me to have kind of psychosomatic symptoms after a success. But this is the conflict, you know. You have to, obviously my origin is Catholic, and you have to pay for what you earn. And so when you started talking about The Last Emperor, which was this quite amazing success, I was used in some way because I could handle it better, because with the Last Tango in Paris, it was the first time it was really maybe too much, because the movie was incredibly seen in the world and everywhere, and I had
not been seen on British television, however.
Really? Oh. I think, I'm sure it will change soon. But I was telling you, that I was very young. I was, I don't know, 30, 31, and I had my face on Newsweek and Time magazine, and it's something that can really be like a hurricane on the psychology of somebody. And Moravia says success is something you have to eat, is a heavy meal, but you have to digest it, and then you will be happy again.
To make movies, to be a director, do you have to be hard or soft?
Both. My tendency is to try to be very close to the actors. Of course, some of them ask for shouts and authoritarian kind of directors, so you have a bit to be. But some of them are very really sadomasochist people, and you know, every movie is a love story with the actors. I really fall in love with all of them. If there isn't a love story, for sure something will be missing in the movie.
Are you loving them, or do you want them to love you?
Oh, it's, you know, love is not, as they say, it takes two to tango. Love is both.
Which other directors or director have you admired or has influenced your work?
I have an endless list of people. There are many movies I like. I go to the movies as much as I can, But the ones that really, I think, influenced me, even if you don't, maybe you don't see it very well, are Godard, Jean Renoir, who for me is #1. Some Japanese like Mizoguchi and Ozu, and Rossellini I love, and Antonioni I love. But I like to see the history of cinema as a long movie with many sequences, and the sequences are the single movies.
You said of The Last Emperor that it was the first of your films in which, instead of making a journey from light into darkness, you were making a journey from darkness into light. What did you mean by that?
That is one of the few movies I made which has a kind of happy ending, because it's the story of the metamorphosis of a kind of super neurotic person, sick with this kind of omnipotence that has been inoculated at the age of 3 when he has seen all the court of China kowtowing in front of him, who in the old age becomes a normal person. And this, I think, is what I would call a kind of happy ending. All my other movies go in a kind of different direction. Often my movies end with a kind of question mark. But the problem is that I fall in love with my movies. At the moment of ending, of finishing, shooting, I don't know how to finish. That's why all my endings are quite anxious ending in general.
Your next film will be Paul Bowles's novel, based on Paul Bowles's novel, The Sheltering Sky. Is that going back to darkness?
This is maybe the real first film noir I have made, it's very difficult to me for me to talk about a movie which I haven't done, because so far it's only a screenplay that I wrote with Mark Peplow, and a book, and then is the memory of few images of North Africa that I've seen in my first location a few months ago, which really do not correspond to what I wanted, which is the blue sky, etc. of Morocco, because I was in Morocco, and in the south of Morocco, at the beginning of the Sahara, and there was snow on the camels, which is something that happens once every 100 years.
But The Last Emperor was a great public theme. This will be a private one.
Yeah, you know, I don't like to repeat myself. After a success, producers and distributors and exhibitors, I mean, the whole business, asked me for the same movie. Please do it again. They even asked me to do Last Tango #2, and I said, but the character is just dead at the end of the movie. I could have, he wasn't dead, he was just wounded, you know, he was at the hospital, then he comes out of the hospital. And I can't because there is something I fear, is mannerism. I know that I am already a kind of mannerist director. My style is quite manneristic. And so I have to fight against that. So I like, after Last Tango in Paris, which was a private story, I did the political movies, Novecento, and then La Luna, which was a private. Now, after this big epic, I like to do this smallest theme, which is a couple, a relationship in a couple.